Ancient handbags solved, and the house of a new location. Secret of the Gods, the ancient handbags decoded. Did you know, from the Sumer to the Mesoamericans to ancient art, many different and ancient cultures often depicted deities or beings holding some kind of a handbag. In Mesopotamia, these bags are depicted being held by winged deities. Some believe it may be represented life because in ancient Egypt these deities are depicted holding an ankh instead of a handbag. In Turkey and Göbekli, they too are depicted carrying a handbag as a representative of the seed of life. To this day, there is no clear answers as to what exactly the bags represented, a mystery, yet clearly something important to our ancestors that we should rediscover. In many different cultures, these handbags appear. Egypt, Samaria, Olmec, even Maori, and they run through the Americas and South America in their rock arts, and even Australia. There's lots of different places that connect back to Arnhem Land, Northern Territory, Australia. And many places have the same symbols and signs. Handbags, also known as purses, in their hands, and have wondered what they are, what they were. Why were there so many identical or very familiar bags or purses in various historical, paperwork, rock arts, on all different continents? I have researched this subject for a while now, and my researching led me to the Anunnaki, as they were the first ones to have petroglyphs and hieroglyphs on their walls with the handbags. And since they were the most ancient culture on earth, I started with them first. And I found I had to go through the Sumerian tablets to understand that culture, and I had to learn to read the Anunnaki language, which took me a few months to understand it and to learn it. There's many theories of what the handbags are, and yes, I've heard them all. From a woman's purse where she carried some belongings for her menstrual cycle, to man bags where they carried their money, to lots of different spiritual devices and apparatuses, to just a complete stone handbag that it was just artificial, that was just a symbol. Lots of different things. But after, like I said, many, many months of researching it and digging in deep, I found the answer. Three handbags were found at this sacred site, as well as a symbology on the stones also is the same symbols that the Australian original people also use as ochre markings on their body. Here's an interesting concept, what I was talking about before. So this culture believed that the purses or the handbags hold magic dust or herbs for getting high, or measurements. Like, there's so many different theories out there. This one talks about doorways or gates. I found this one quite intriguing, that the New Zealand Maoris tells of a hero who once ascended to the home of the gods and returned to earth carrying 3 baskets full of wisdom. So the Maoris believed that the handbags symbolise worship and gratitude for the divinely inspired knowledge. The ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, the handbag-like images can be seen, this time serving as a home for the gods and the goddesses, with the purse straps being the dome poles for the portable tents and the square bottom being the cloth or animal skins laid across the poles. This structure is quite similar to the Native American teepee or the Central Asian yurt. In this slide, we have a South American petroglyph on a rock with a serpent, handbag, and he looks like to be riding in some sort of space machine or time machine, some sort of space traveller, even with a helmet on. And then over in Mesopotamia, we have the symbol of the pine cone in his hand and a watch on his wrist, and the stone handbag again in his other hand with another watch on his wrist. And this picture or petroglyph or carving is also a Venki. Some of my research, I had to look up different people who did their versions of the Sumerian tablets and what they said about the handbags. And some of the evidence in the Sumerian tablets talk about alien technology and breathing equipment and advanced medical procedures, and lots of other things as well, including the Egyptian pyramids and wars and the evolution of humans and DNA manipulation, and all links back to biblical scholars and biblical verses. The same with Adam and Eve comes from the Anunnaki. The Great Flood comes from the Anunnaki. And Moses, all that is linked into the Sumerian tablets as well. But I was trying to look up if they had written anything about these stone handbags. And it just doesn't stop at South America or Australia or New Zealand or Mesopotamia. Here is also an island in eastern Indonesia that also has on it the stone handbags. So the Anunnaki went all around the world and created these glyphs and knowledge and lore about their culture, and it spread worldwide. In another PowerPoint presentation I'm actually doing is called Anunnaki Worldwide, which shows the proof of them being on all the different continents. Mesopotamia has a lot of relevant images and knowledge and written records talking about a heroic bringer of civilization to humanity known as the Abdat, Dagon, and I don't know the other one, and about a mystical figure who's portrayed in several different forms as the fishtail man, the eagle head man, or the wing man, also carrying a bag in one hand. This strange deity was considered the founder of civilization, emerging from the waters of the Persian Gulf, bringing with him the knowledge of writing, arts, and science. This strange figure was not alone. Rather, he was said to be the leader of 7 sages, known as the Abgal, all of whom were fish men tasked with bringing civilization to earth by the god Enki. Here are some artifacts representing the fish god, half man, half fish, which is also talked about in one of my channeling sessions with Enki, how he created the half fish and half human as one of the 4 Australian original tribes. And on the other picture here is of a giant man with the sun in the background handing the stone handbags to a smaller man who he created, the human race. So he gave human race the knowledge. And here is an Australian rock art done with red and white ochre and orange. And it talks about the creator mother, a female, a humanoid, aspects of the rainbow serpent. And she's carrying with her many sacred bags. In this slide, we have some written proof of the Aboriginal culture, or as I like to call them, the original culture, and about their lore and their star knowledge, representing that Earth Mother who would carry all the bags. And it's interesting that it also incorporates the lotus flower and yams into her form, whether she is primarily in her snake form or human shape. There's many different versions of Rainbow Serpent and the Earth Mother tradition, but they always seem to overlap and use the same symbolism. And many bags are featured in rock arts across our continent. And they say that 7 male sages, association with the 7 females, a group of sisters that came from Earth from the Pleiades to help in the creation process of human beings. The legendary Palladian sky heroes of the dreaming. In another PowerPoint presentation, I am doing all the sacred sites that are taboo to the original races that I feel have a very strong Anunnaki appearance, symbolism, and structure. And I will get that one out as soon as possible to prove that the Anunnaki were in Australia. And here is slides of very similar rock arts and rock paintings that are found. One in Turkey and the other one's from Arnhem Land. And they're really very quite similar. And beneath is the creator spirit in serpent form. And it looks like a boat, and it looks like arrows, and it looks like heads, which is very similar to a lot of Anunnaki images in Sumeria. just like the last slide with the water serpent in the water with the arrows, is very familiar with the Egyptian boats and the Egyptian Nut, the sky goddess, and the serpentine-bodied goddess holding exactly the same position. So it's gone through Egypt as well, the Australian art, and the Anunnaki symbolism. Life was brought in a bag. God came in with light from darkness and gave man a soul, and the sons of man brought in with light came the pillars of heaven. He who came from on high brought life into the world. All the different stone handbags from around the world. So here is where it gets interesting. On my researching and reading the Sumerian tablets, I came across passages about the MES, Mes or Mes. And in the passages, it talks about stolen crystals like computers and portable command modules. Each me controlled certain functions and could operate in different ways. And Enki had them, Enlil had them, and other serpent goddesses took them off them and took them to their homelands. And there was many different stone bags that I believed carried these me's. And what I've been shown by channeling is they're like a crystal inside of those stone bags, sometimes grinded up into the bags themselves, or sometimes placed within the bags. And those crystals hold all of these certain functions and memories and about civilization and about the Anunnaki race, as well as music and sciences and weaving and building. There were so many different things encoded onto these crystals and then placed into these handbags. I also came across some other interesting information about Moses being on the mountain and talking to the burning bush and writing the tablets and writing the Ten Commandments. But on researching the old Bible, it doesn't actually say they were stone tablets. It actually can be translated into a 6-sided or 8-sided ruby crystal that he encoded the information into. So there we go again, that the ancients would use different crystals to store knowledge and ancient technology and ancient wisdom. Also in the Sumerian tablet, it talks about the installation of a master computer controls in the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and that there was a first pyramid war and a second pyramid war, and that lots of Marduk and Ra and a lot of the serpent goddesses, Nima, who was a Thor, and Isis is also of Anunnaki blood, and there's lots of different talks about the goddess of the rocket ships, who later Isis became the mistress of the pyramid. But before the Isis and the Egyptian gods and goddesses as we know them today, before all of them, it was actually an Anunnaki starship or star base or landing base. And because the MESs were stored there was a lot of great wars that happened around the pyramids to gain and steal the Mies from each other. Because the more Mies that you would have, the more power and knowledge you would contain. But isn't that interesting? And I also got told, channeled wise, that the Mies were actually stored right on the top of the peak of the pyramid where they call the capstone was. And the capstone was once pure gold, but of course that has gone centuries ago. And the Anunnaki were obviously after a lot of gold, so they created that gold shield that went over the capstone, and inside that, on the top, very top of the pyramid on the inside, is where they would keep the Mies. And here is an artifact showing the Tree of Life and the creation of humanity, and the two Anunnakis next to it, Enki and Enlil, with the stone handbags. Here's some other information that I found. The Me, he was the keeper of the holy powers called Me. The exact meaning of his name is not sure. The common translation is Lord of the Earth. The Sumerian En is translated as Lord and Ki as Earth, but there are theories that Ki in his name has other origins. So here are all different pictures that I've collected of, again, showing the stone handbags from all different cultures. And here is some information that I found. The Anunnaki royals carried crystal computers a few inches large Mies in their purses that they wore on their wrist also. And they sewed the Mies controlled into their clothes or worked into their scepters, handheld weapons, as well as weapons and devices that they installed on their aircraft and in their control rooms. And a lot of Anunnaki goddesses, or as I like to call them, the serpent goddesses, which I'll do another PowerPoint about the serpent goddesses because they have a huge, massive role, obviously, in creating humanity, would seduce all the Anunnaki gods and try and get their hands on the Mies so then they can control cities and power. Also, the Mies can do with interplanetary travels, communications, scientific, technological, lots of different things have been used for the Mies, and that's why people wanted them, because they just had so much knowledge and had so much power, and they could control the masses and they could control their area by having the Mies. Again, some pictures of the stone handbags and the Ankh. And as you can see, again, different culture with the picture at the end, but all of them with the same similarities with those little circular things, with the man with the fish head, fish tail at the back of him, and then over here on the statue with the circular things on his head, and the ankh being held the same way and holding the knowledge. So maybe the crystals were then placed into these ankhs, and they were used that way in daily life and daily functions, instead of pulling out the big guns and pulling out the big stone handbags. These stone handbags can of course have a link with the Ark of the Covenant. Inside there could have been the handbags with the me's in them, and that's why they always talk about such great power that comes out of the ark, like torrences of winds and fire and things like that. It could have been weather components placed into those crystals, into the handbags. Something like what we've got now, the harp technology could have come from one of the me's. Also, with our computers today, they're done with clear quartz crystals, which holds and store knowledge, just like in ancient times, and we've got that in our times in our computers right now. There's also lots of talk in the Sumerian tablets about the serpent goddesses using their, well, let's face it, their pussy power to get the me's and to sew it into their clothing, and so it makes their clothing look radiant and it makes themselves look younger and glowing. And these serpent goddesses were definitely known for their sexual practices. And it talks about computers dating way back before Jesus, obviously, and and everything just being used. The technology that they gave us in ancient times, we're only just starting to rediscover and learn about and putting it into modern times, but it all comes back from the ancient handbags of the Medes. And here's an interesting stone handbag with the two fish people, and again with the circles. And isn't it interesting today? We still buy crystals and we sit with them and we hold them and we ask for divine guidance. And it was the same in the ancient times. They were looking for divine formulas by using the me's. They were looking for specific knowledge, power, and charisma by having them. All the kings of the gods had them. And if you to own one or be in ownership of one, you could also help with the powers to regain your home planet and to heal and to perform holy rites, to control any technology and scientific facility. So these things just had massive power and massive knowledge, and would have been very important to have them and to look after them and to use them the right way, because if you use them the wrong way, people could rob the temples or destroy them, use all their powers and will and sexual ways to try and get them. Wars, the Great Pyramid War 1 and 2 was fought over them, and you would be put in imprisonment. It's just like temples could be destroyed by them. Some people even say they could have been nuclear weapons. Someone could have programmed a nuclear weapon into one of the crystals that was in the handbags. The list really goes on. Again, pictures from Turkey, from Samaria, from South America, all with the handbags. And isn't it funny, all of those places have the most ancient cultures and ancient ways, and all have a serpent god or goddess about them and about their law. And again, the handbags. In some of the stone handbags, there were tablets which I believe were encoded onto crystals yet again. And one of them was called the Tablet of Destinies, and it was found in the temple. That was obviously written from stone from someone holding the crystal and downloading the information and then putting it on stone, which talking about the magical powers of the knees, again the divine formulas, data banks, managing specific tasks. All of them all come back to the same thing. Much as you research, and there's not a lot of information about the knees out there, but the stuff I have found is all very similar, and sometimes it goes a little bit deeper, but not all the time. It also could contain star charts and orbital data panels, how to make flying machines, how to approach the heavens, so how to ascend and descend. They could be the perfect antenna for communication between the Earth and Nibiru. There was lots of hymns written about them. There's lots of different evidence out there about the knees and about them being contained in a stone handbag. And here's another interesting picture. They were also found in India, in their culture as well. They have the stone handbags. And in one of the presentations that I'm doing with Anunnaki Worldwide, I go through all the different places in India where the Anunnaki was and their culture. You see the Nagas and the serpents and the serpent goddesses, and even Buddha with the serpents on the rivers. You still see all the serpents. It all goes back to the Anunnaki as well. And their little domes that they have on sacred sites in India, they go back to the flying machines that the Anunnaki actually came or travelled around Earth in. They came down in a bigger mothership, but they also had like little pods and things like that that they would travel around Earth with to go to all the different continents. And you see them stupas in India, which represent those pods. In the Sumerian records, it talks about the great gods that had their own planes or birds or helicopter whirlybirds, and that they would travel in them to go to the great temples or to go to their spacecraft or to go to their spaceports. It also talks about going to different continents and doing different experiments in different cultures, and going to South Africa to mine the gold, and all different places. And here's just a thing more about the knees, and the space control centers, and the Tablet of Destinies that we talked about before. I also found other researchers talking about inside the stone handbags being holograms, and I also got channeled information that the Mecca, the black cube, and that they walk around 3 times, also contains one of the stone handbags with a knee in it. And that's why the men have to walk around 3 times to absorb all the information and to worship it and to give thanks for their own creation. And here are some quotes that Sitchin, who studied the Sumerian tablets and translated them, wrote about it also. At the top of this stone pillar in Turkey are 3 handbags. Here is some more information about the name or names that were in the stone handbags. Controlled the function of the kings or queens, or the commanders of the earth. Whoever possessed it gets the function and the power. Here is also some verses I have found in books about the me. Divine commandments, divine powers, or even mythic virtues. The me, however, are described as a physical object that one could pick up and carry, or even put on like a backpack, and which contained secret knowledge or data. Perhaps they were something like our present-day computer chips, on which programs and operational orders have been minutely recorded. On them, the essentials of civilizations were encoded. But they were also put into scepters and staff, and exalted shrines, and religious rulership. That there were Enki had 7 me's, and it gave him great stature among his people. That the divine lady, the great goddess, wanted the me's, a temple and its rituals, priests and attendants, justice and courts, music and arts, masonry, woodwork, metalworking, leatherwork and weaving, scribeship, mathematics, and last but not least, weapons and the art of warfare. Also, this me information must have included descriptions of how to carry out rituals, administer justice, play music, create art, how to craft and display objects of masonry, woodwork, metal, leather and weaving. And this computed information included how to make and display weapons of warfare. Very similar to what we have today, the 3D printer, as it is now capable of making objects. So, with all the evidence that I collected by reading the Sumerian tablets, reading from other websites and other researchers, and putting it all together, I came to the very strong conclusion that the stone handbags carried crystals that were used like computer chips to store and to then give us the knowledge, wisdom and power to develop as a society and as a civilization. And that's why they were held very sacred and very honoured to the ancient beings that once walked first here on earth and that created humanity. that the me's inside the stone handbags were of great importance not only to the king and to the Anunnaki race, but for the development of the human race. And we are still going through that handbag and finding different bits and pieces of that knowledge and then using that and creating our new technologies, which are actually ancient technologies. So while I was researching the stone handbags and finding out that the me was contained within it, I also came across the House of Anu, which is the main god or the king god that came down first and then sent his son and his stepson down to earth. And he had lots of different palaces and lots of different temples because he had lots of different women that he used to like to take there, or Anunnaki goddesses that he would like to take there, or consorts as they're called. And they were trying to find the House of Anu. And I came across some quotes saying that his temple or his house had a sculptured stone garden, and there wasn't anything in the Sumerian lands or Persian Gulf area that had a sculptured garden, even though they were saying one of the temples there was the House of Anu, but it didn't reflect what the Sumerian tablets were saying about the temple or House of Anu. And so I got to researching, and then I found this place in South Africa that talks about a sculptured gardens of stones that represent different things. And I got guided that this was the House of Anu, and that his big temple, which they also talk about a stepped terrace temple, is no longer present there. All the stones have been pulled away and probably used for different farming things. And it also reminded me of Gympie Pyramid, that is also a stepped terrace and stepped pyramid, which could have been used for one of his travels to Australia as well. But I found this stone garden. So Makawasi, which is in the Andes Mountains near Lima, and it's right on the riverbank, which of course they wouldn't have to need water, and it's above sea level, so it's nice and safe from the elements of earth. And around that whole area there's very curious shapes of human faces and animals, very visible on the granite rocks, and really huge sets of different granite rocks, curious shapes, and religious symbols. Here's one over here in the picture. And to me, this one is a dead giveaway, the African Queen, which has been compared to the Sphinx in Egypt, the so-called Egyptian princess, the rock which is said to look like the Egyptian goddess of the same name. It has been suggested that these rocks show the connection between the people in this land in South America to ancient Egypt. Another notable rock includes the face, and it looks like the face that they found on Mars, and it's called the Monument of Humanity. Can you see the resemblance from the Egyptian queen that is found in South America to the one found in Egypt? Here are some of the other huge granite rocks that have the animals, the frogs, the Egyptian goddess, the African or Egyptian queen, the camel, that are in this sculptured stone garden. The Indian stupas, which are said to be a representation of the Anunnaki space pods or small spacecraft that flew around to all the different continents. And again, we have here the circles and the spirals and the shape of them. And I've got channeled that on the top of these stupas and the ornamental things that appear up at the top is actually when they were using weapons, that they would come out of the spaceship, and that's what would be the weapon of fire. Fire onto those continents or fire onto different structures. And so yeah, that's the weapon. So here's one from India. It has a lot of symbolism to it of the Anunnaki. Here's another fancy stupa in India. Beautiful white one, white temple. And look how it's got the dragon dogs or the lions at the front, which is very symbolized in Anunnaki, where the serpent goddesses would stand upon the lions and to show their dominance and to show their power, but also that Enki was also represented, I don't know if it was hugging, but holding lions in his arms and being powerful and so much bigger and larger than a lion. So it's funny that these temples also have that symbolism as well. And again, you can see the weapon firing on the top of the spacecraft. And the little ones, we have the little lanterns at the front. I know I have some in my garden and other people have probably seen them around. They're just really small representations of the spacecraft and the glowing lights that come out of them as well. Not only are stupas in India, there's also many in Indonesia, on the main island and on the other islands, and they're found in lots of other different continents as well. So they're all seen and representing and recording history by building these stupas and to put it into architect, what they were seeing in the skies. So I wanted to go to the one in Indonesia. The last time that I went to Bali, I was going to take a flight over and to see that one, because I just wanted to sit among them and to try and channel some information. Hopefully I'll get to do that soon and come back with more information about stupas. Thank you for watching the presentation. Hope it's enlightened you. Hope it's encouraged you to go and do your own research. And, I hope you have a lovely day. Bye.